Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this session today. So this session will focus on building the next generation of responsible businesses and leaders through decent work. And our moderator for the session today is Anita. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Anita, who will take us through the discussions. Anita, the screen is all yours.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the introduction, Dennis, and thank you all for joining us on day 3 of Virtual Sandkelp. And it'll be nice to meet people in person if you're going to the in-person event. I'm delighted to be hosting this discussion about building the next generation of responsible businesses and leaders through decent work. And I'm going to introduce first the panel who's joining us today. And then I'll give you a bit of an overview of decent work before we engage in the panel discussion. And then towards the end, we will go into breakout rooms so you can dig deeper into what we're talking about. So I'm Anita Thiessen. I'm the CEO at Youth Business International. We're joined today by Gladys Kavati, who is Executive Director of Sustainable Business Consulting, Carol Apple, who is Head of Entrepreneurship Training at Youth Business International, Linda Magagnene, Business Advisor at TechnoServe South Africa. And by video, we'll be joined by Maria Morgan, an entrepreneur supported by TechnoServe. But before I hand over to the panel, I'll just give you a quick overview of decent work. We can go to the next sections of freedom, equity, security, and human dignity. Yeah, and so when we dig deeper into what does that actually mean, we believe that decent work provides security and safety and a better standard of living for people who are employed. It offers individuals personal development, social protection for families, and shields us from discrimination. And that through decent work, we're given a voice and are able to participate in decision making. And the first question I'm going to put to the panel will be about why it matters and why it matters for entrepreneurship. But by way of introduction, in terms of the work that YBI has done today, if you look at the boxes in green, what we've seen is that if there's a lack of understanding of decent work amongst somebody who runs an enterprise, a lack of understanding of the law, lack of any enforcement mechanism for those standards, and if there's negative business practices and cultures, that those in turn will then lead a business that has a growth mindset, as it were, down the wrong path, which is, pursuing higher profit margins. In order to do that, reducing health and safety benefits, there's poor working conditions, and ultimately a dissatisfied workforce resulting in low productivity. So if the earlier slides that I was setting out was both defining and we're making the human case for decent work, what we'll focus on a lot in this session is the business case. The why does it matter to understand and embed decent work in the running of a business for not just the sake of the employees, but also for the sake of the business. I'm now going to invite the panelists to join the discussion. And I'm going to start with an opening question, which is why do you think that decent work is important? And particularly, why does it matter for entrepreneurship? And Carol, could I ask you to start us off in this discussion?
Thanks, Anita. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in this conversation. Really passionate about decent work and the importance of it for entrepreneurship. I think we, as entrepreneurship support organizations, I think what we try to do is to promote economic growth through entrepreneurship. But when we talk about growth, we don't talk about growth at any cost. So we are becoming more and more conscious about the importance of not making any harm to the environment. So it's not at the cost of destroying the environment. It's not about with the cost of destroying, the social structures or, penalizing some people. And then obviously when we talk about entrepreneurs, we're talking about the creation of jobs. So it's also not about growth at any cost, sacrificing jobs. So we really want to make sure that the people, the entrepreneurs and their employees, they have a decent job. And basically that means that we want them to work in a safe and hygienic environment that's not going to cause them any health or safety issues. We want them to receive a living wage with which they can sustain themselves and their families, that they work a decent amount of hours, that they are not overworking regularly, that they have time to rest and time for leisure with friends and family. We are aiming at not having forced labor or child labor, which is a horrible situation that still exists around the world, that there's no discrimination, that people have access to social security, and all of those things that make a decent job for the entrepreneurs. And we all know that entrepreneurs, they start business because they want to improve their own living condition. So it's really important that the business does not make that worse for them compared to, having a job. So first of all, we look at the entrepreneur in the importance that they have a decent job for themselves, that they are working in a healthy and safe environment, that they get enough wage, that they have social security and all of that. And obviously, when the entrepreneur starts to grow the business, they start to hire employees. And it's really important that those employees are also protected, and they're also creating decent jobs. And especially nowadays, the entrepreneurs, they are looking beyond the money. So many entrepreneurs, they are starting a business not just because they want to make money for themselves, but they also want to make a difference in their communities. They want to make a difference in their countries, in their regions, in the world. So they're really trying to promote social improvement and make that their mark in the world. So it's really, really important that we help them create responsible business. And as part of that concept of responsible business, not just not impacting and benefiting the environment, impacting positively the society, but also that through the business they are creating decent jobs for themselves, and then everyone wins. The entrepreneur wins when they're doing that, the employees win, the society wins. And it's really important for organizations like us, like YBI, our members, and all the other entrepreneurship support organizations, that we are helping promote that to entrepreneurs. Because as you can see, there are many barriers, as Anita showed at the beginning, that pretty much make it hard for entrepreneurs to see the importance of decent work, or to know what the laws are that sometimes are unclear, not enforced. So it's really important that we are supporting them in that journey. Thanks.
Great. Gladys, you've also done work in this space. So could you give us your perspective on why decent work is important, and again, why it matters for entrepreneurship?
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for everyone who's made time to join us for this session. I'm Gladys Kivati. And what we believe at Sustainable Business Consulting is our aim is to actually inspire, engage, and empower companies to reimagine their plans, so that they can actually achieve sustained economic prosperity, promote social equity, as well as ensure environmental good. And we totally believe in the nexus, of shared prosperity. And with that, we believe that people are the heart of every successful enterprise. And here, when you talk about creating employment and promoting decent work, we are trying to talk about, how do we actually ensure that we are promoting safe jobs, but also fair jobs. It's not, we have a lot of statistics of, different stakeholders, be it enterprise support organizations, be it non-governmental organizations. There's that narrative of, hey, we've created X number of jobs. But one of the questions we aim to ask is, for us to really attain shared prosperity, are we creating safe and fair jobs? And there's a move, especially among various stakeholders, be it investors, financiers, even customers, who are really calling out, enterprises, asking them, what type of jobs are you creating? Are they safe? Are they fair? And also with the advent of COVID-19, we've seen that employment issues have really taken a center stage. Right now with complexity, with emerging risks in the business ecosystem, losing a worker to injury, or even just not giving fair terms of employment to, say, employees within your business, can really land you in great crisis. So we are saying that it's very expensive for a business to really not promote decent work, because it's expensive and it can cause disruption as well, cost a business, which at this time and place with the COVID-19 and with all this, with the economic crisis that is happening, it can really get very expensive for a business. So at SPC, we've developed a toolkit, which I believe we'll be describing, talking more about it, because we believe that to really promote safe and fair work. And this is also in line with the sustainable development goals. We have SDG 8, 5, and 3, which actually promotes, recognizes the impact of skilled, engaged, and productive workforce as key to, say, sustainability in an enterprise. And we see that sustainability comes with, are your employees happy? Are your employees safe? Can they continuously deliver the outcomes of your business? Can they continuously, grow the economy of the country, or even the ecosystem that they're operating in? And that's what we totally believe, in line with the ILO standards. The previous speaker has just talked about issues to do with child labor, discrimination, sexual violence. All these things are happening at the workplace, and they're really, we need to speak about them, because they can break and make an organization. And I'm glad we are having this session, and I look forward to deliberations on how we can actually make this a topic of discussion, even as we think about economic growth and even scale up of different enterprises across different sectors. Thank you.
Thanks, Gladys. And I'm just going to invite Linda in a second, but also to say that we will be going into the breakout rooms, but also feel free to pop into the chat who you are, where you're from, and if you already have any questions or any experiences that you want to share. So we've heard about the positive imperative, but also risk mitigation, as it were. Linda, could you share your experience from TechnoServe?
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So in South Africa, we try, with TechnoServe particularly, we try to encourage contracts between employers and employees. We have found that a lot of small businesses do find it costly, as Gladys had mentioned, that it's very costly for them to invest in decent work. So in terms of safety and hygiene, work conditions, wages, and working hours. So they opt not to have contracts with their employees to keep flexibility, as well as not having to deal with the legal cost of having to terminate someone if there's a crisis. And we've also found that during COVID-19, the impact of having to invest in your company's safety and hygiene was a problem for many small businesses, as they could not afford the constant COVID tests that had to be conducted, the fumigating and the sanitizers to ensure that everyone feels very safe in the working space. So a lot of companies had opted to release employees out of their contracts and slowly coming back into the workplace after, not after, just as COVID-19 is slowly settling. A lot of employees in small businesses do not want to engage in a contract with their employers. So we're trying to engage in that so that employees feel that they have stability in their workplace and security, create security for them. In South Africa, a lot of our purchases, we cannot make a purchase if we do not have an employment agreement. So that creates a lot of unstable situations for a lot of people. So we working on this and trying to educate our youth on the importance of this.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Linda, because I think we've been talking about why it matters, but it's also not easy. And there can be both psychological and practical barriers. So if we move from, as it were, the point of principle to what does this actually mean in practice? How do you support entrepreneurs to to consider and ideally adopt decent work practices. Both Sustainable Business Consulting and YBI have developed resources specifically looking at introducing these practices into small and growing businesses. And the question to both Gladys and then to Carol is, how did you design and tailor these materials to make them practical, accessible, and to help change the mindset? And this time I'll start with you, Gladys. And I think you might be sharing your screen.
Thank you so much. So I'll be sharing my screen. So we developed a toolkit, and the toolkit was developed in partnership or by support by the Agidias Foundation, who have been very instrumental in ensuring development of this toolkit. And so what we did is we brought across different intermediaries. Intermediaries are enterprise support organizations, and these are institutions that work with SMEs at different levels. And we engaged different intermediaries in Kenya, Uganda, in Zambia, and across Africa. And in this particular case, we co-created a toolkit. And in the toolkit, we were trying to ask ourselves, how do intermediaries support small and growing businesses they support, they work with or they engage in, create safe and fair jobs, create safe and fair employment, and through a co-creation session. And for those who may not be familiar with co-creation is a process where you sit and ideate with different stakeholders on what does safe and fair employment mean to you? What does it mean to the small and growing businesses you work with? So we came across 7 minimum practices. So of course, these minimum practices may not really apply to all small and growing businesses, because we realize there are different stages of businesses. There are those businesses that are starting or they have an idea. So those ones, we call them the idea stage businesses. And we have those that are either in the early and growth stage, meaning they're ready to receive investment. But then these 7 minimum practices were proposed, and we're calling them like standards, like SOPs, for creating safe and fair employment across African SGBs. And we had, the first one was alignment, program, and exclusion criteria. And this speaks around what, Anita, you talked about, the ILO standards. The ILO framework speaks about child labor, even standards to do with, say, the UN Global Compact, or even other frameworks that really speak about employment issues. So the first question an intermediary, as they are engaging in small and growing businesses, would be, are you aligned to an exclusion criteria? Is there an exclusion criteria in which you're using to really engage your employees? For instance, I think one common criteria is child labor. So one intermediary would ask themselves, is this small and growing businesses not engaged in child labor? The other one would be compliance to legal regulations. And compliance to legal regulations here means in every country, there are laws and regulations around employment issues, around decent work. For instance, number of leave days, maternity, the minimum pay, minimum wage. In African countries, apparently, we don't really have legal regulations around living wage, but it's an emerging topic. So another criteria would be, does this small and growing business comply to the legal regulations, which is mandatory? And then the third one would be safety at work. For a small and growing business to promote safe and fair employment, they would want to ask themselves, am I creating a safe space for my employees? When you think about ventilation, when you think about masks, PPEs to reduce exposure to biological elements, when you think about number of hours working to reduce fatigue, this is around safety at work. The fourth thing, which of course is emerging, especially with COVID-19, is mental well-being. We've seen a lot of stress cases. There's a lot that is happening, especially during this time where people were forced to work at home. So in creating a safe and fair job, you need to also think about the mental and well-being of your employees. And then policies and procedures. This is also another practice that we were trying to promote. Let's talk about a human resource policy. We are talking about an anti-discrimination policy. We are talking about discrimination policies to do with leave, policies to do with sexual harassment. You're talking about policies to do with, what other policies exist? There's so many policies that exist. Human rights policy, depending on the type of institution and the sector you're involved in. Another minimum practices was fair work practices. Like, how are you actually promoting fairness at your workplace? Do you discriminate? Do you hire based on, do you practice nepotism? Do employees really understand their roles? Or someone gets a long JD and when they come to work, they are forced to do 1,000,001 things. Are there fair work practices Are you giving people breaks? Or people are working from 8 to 5? Now people working from home, people are working overnight to meet deadlines. This is what you call about fair work practices. And then sector-specific standards are aligned to specific sector. Even the agriculture sector, there are certain specific standards that really are outlined either by law or by sector, saying this is what you're supposed to do. And then, as I said, they may appear many, but then what we did is we came up with a decision tree depending on the type of business and the size of business you're in. I will not go deep into this, but what we did is we categorized different practices depending on the stage of business. If you're an idea stage business, meaning you're starting off your business, you have an idea, you have, say, 2 team members, meaning you may be required to really just abide by, say, 2 practices. By the time you're a venture and you're seeking investment, in that particular time, you'll be required to really have a long number of practices that you're adhering to because of the size of your portfolio, the type of business you're involved in, the sector. So there are many dynamics, and this toolkit, we developed it in co-creation with other people. And the third thing was, as an intermediary, what is your entry point? And intermediaries, you realize, or ESOs or hubs or accelerators or incubators, all these are classified as intermediaries. There are different stages at which they engage small and growing businesses. You either engage them at the pre-engagement, meaning as they are coming into your program, what people mainly call needs assessment, due diligence, gap analysis. So depending on your sector or the type of small and growing businesses you attract, you can decide to assess, where am I going to determine if at all an SGB fits within our institution or is really compliant with some of these minimum practices. It can be at pre-engagement. But what we say, these are not exclusionary standards or exclusionary practices. You can say, for now, we are going to do a needs assessment to identify gaps that these small and growing businesses is facing, be it at safety, be it at compliance, but we are going to either engage them, that is through advisory, peer-to-peer, networking. We are going to engage them and train them on how they can actually move from point A to B, from an unsafe work environment to a safe work environment, and develop an action plan. And then throughout the advisory period, an intermediary or an ESO at this point can say, this is the milestone this certain business has achieved. And by the time they're exiting your program, you can actually have clear metrics. This small and growing business has grown from, say, unsafe employment to safe employment, has grown from unfair work practice to fair work practice. But at the end of the day, we want to see that growth and continuum by the time and small and growing businesses is exiting a program. That is all from me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gladys. And I think the combination of both what you've said with these 2 slides is that it's not just that there's a big rule book and everybody's got to get the rule book right at the beginning and do everything. But there's different stages of business development and different stages of engagement from an ESO perspective. But how do you get from the starting point to somewhere which is more decent, if I can put it that way? Could you unshare your slides, and then can I hand over to Carol to talk about what we've done at Youth Business International?
Thanks, Anita. So what we have done is to develop decent work training for our members to help them embed the decent work as part of their training programs with entrepreneurs. So everything was based on a piece of research that we have done, and this is usually how we go about creating training programs and new products and services. We try to base everything on a big piece of research to understand what is already out there, what are the concepts, what are the gaps. So that's what we have done. So this was all done under a partnership with IKEA Foundation for a program focused in India and Bangladesh. So the research focused a lot on the laws, on the situation of entrepreneurs in those 2 countries. But a lot of that was also more on an international context. So basically through that research, we identified, the principles that we wanted to work with around decent work. What were those principles? And then we developed the content for that. So there were a few things that were really, really important for us to consider when we were doing that work. So the first one was the importance of focusing on not just on entrepreneurs who already have employees, but also what we call the solopreneurs. So these are people that are working on their own. They sometimes are working with a family member or a friend. And in the end, they need to create a decent job for themselves as well. So they need to understand that they should be paying for Social Security because you never know what might happen the next day. They need to make sure that the environment where they are working is safe, is healthy, that they're working a decent amount of hours, that they're not overworking for too long. Obviously, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you need to work more hours than others, but it shouldn't be a constant. So all those things also that message needs to get across to people who are solopreneurs as well. So the training was focused on both solopreneurs and entrepreneurs who already have employees. The other thing that was really important for us was to focus on things that are very practical, things that are actionable, things that the entrepreneur could start implementing the next day. Because if you create something that is too complicated and you make a monster out of the content, people would just leave the training and think, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. So for us, it was really, really important that every single module produced a few very practical ideas, practical actions. And for us, something that Gladys mentioned as well was really important to understand that entrepreneurship is a journey. So there are some things that you can implement from a startup stage, but there are things that you cannot implement immediately because of the cost that it's going to have. And you know that sometimes when you are starting a business, you cannot spend too much money in a few things. So what we try to do is to also create a journey of, you know, what is basic in that specific decent work principle. So what is basic things that you can do to make your environment more healthy and safe? What are the basics that you can do to have Social Security paid? Or, you know, when talking about working hours, you know, if you're starting a business and you need your employees to overwork, try to negotiate with them. So things that you can do sometimes even without a big cost to your business. So that's something that we have also embedded in the training. Another thing really, really important that we've been talking about from the beginning is the importance of creating the business case, because we do face a change of mindset. When you're talking about decent work, is not just the practical things. You also need to help the entrepreneur understand why they need to do this, and sometimes even what they're gonna get out of implementing decent work principles in their business. So we worked quite a lot to help them understand that. So how implementing decent work principles will help them improve the business, improve their lives as entrepreneurs, the lives of their employees, how that would help them to retain employees and potentially reduce costs of having to recruit and train people all the time because you're losing employees every now and then. And then also create the business case for the organizations that are working with those entrepreneurs. Like, why should you implement a decent work element in your training program or your mentoring program, your coaching program? If you already have 120 hours of training, why that is important. So we also try to build that business case. And then finally, I saw a question in the chat about that, the importance of creating something that can be adapted, because obviously YBI is an international network. We have members all over the world. We have members in developing countries like India and Bangladesh, where it all started, but you also have members in developed countries. So we also need to understand that the laws are different, the culture is different, and that everything needs to be adaptable to them. So these were the principles that guided the development of our decent work training. And the way we framed it, it's an 8-module training. We have identified 8 decent work principles. We have 1 module per principle. These are all self-paced. They are available on Google Classroom, so people can go through the modules. Each module comes with an introductory video. We have some additional links for people who want to dive in a bit more and understand more of the principles, the international rules, and even where they can find information in their own country. And then we always have a checklist, one for solopreneurs, as I mentioned, and one for entrepreneurs. So what are the things that you can start implement immediately in the short, medium, and long term to implement that principle in the business? And then we have also 2 live sessions, one at the beginning for an introduction, and the other one later down the line, just to have questions and all of that. And what we do is to deliver this training to practitioners. So we deliver the training to our members, and we teach them those decent work principles, and then they do the work of adapting that to the local context, sometimes doing the research about the local laws, what are the maximum of hours that someone can work. Nowadays in India is 44 hours per week, sometimes 48. In France is 35, so they need to do that tailoring to the local context. So we also support them in that process, and then they decide what parts of the training they're going to take to the local entrepreneurs. Some people take the whole training and deliver it completely to the entrepreneurs. Sometimes they just pick a few modules that are most important for the kind of entrepreneurs that they support. So yeah, it's been 2 years that we're delivering it. We can see a lot of great results and stories that we are hearing from members and from entrepreneurs that are benefiting from that knowledge and starting to implement actions slowly but surely. And it's really nice to see. But that's still work that needs to be done to raise awareness and to help people really implement that in their training programs. Thank you.
Carol, there's just one very specific, I think you kind of answered it by saying that people can choose and can do it in a modular way. But one question that's just come through is how long do, if from the point of view of an ESO that's actually supporting entrepreneurs, how long does the training take, given that there's all sorts of other training and services that are provided?
So the training that we designed is 2 weeks long. So it's self-paced, so people can go through the modules and the content at their own pace. And then when we had members implementing, it varies a lot. Some people deliver in like a 1-day training, very intensively. Sometimes they split parts of the modules here and there. So it's really very tailored to what the organization needs.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good segue into Linda. But before I hand over to Linda, Gladys and Carol, there's one question which is, do we need to adapt our thinking about decent work in light of COVID? So after Linda has spoken, I think I'll come back to both of you for a final thought on that before we go into the breakout rooms. So Linda, at TechnoServe, you did take the modular approach. You just introduced an element of the YBI decent work training. So could you tell us about which element you introduced and why?
TechnoServe South Africa is running a 12-month project. The project was called YID, Textiles, Youth Ideas Development, in 2021. The program was developed to provide youth with a certified textiles training. So they learned how to make patterns, cut patterns, and put the garment together on a machine. We're also training on entrepreneurship, and we provide business funding to the 10 best business ideas. So the rest of our runner-ups were placed into learnerships. In the program, we recruited 45 beneficiaries and 11 were deaf from the deaf community. So we faced challenges with training our deaf beneficiaries. Some of the most, to name just 3 of the most important things we found challenges in with training our deaf beneficiaries was having to rely on an interpreter to deliver the material that we were training on at the correct pace as the rest of the group, as well as ensuring that it's actually correct. We also had a problem with finding a balance of grievances between our deaf beneficiaries and our hearing beneficiaries. The deaf beneficiaries felt we weren't providing them with enough or the same type of material as the hearing beneficiaries. and the treatment wasn't equal. So another thing is we had to be very sensitive not to offend our deaf beneficiaries with the type of words we use and our actions. So with deaf beneficiaries, we only found out during the training that when you're trying to get their attention, for instance, you need to just stomp your feet. Don't push them, don't pull them, don't touch them. Just stomp your feet. So we made common errors of touching them and how we'd address some of our material, which to them, obviously, we were discriminating them. So the training came at a perfect time for us to try it out. And we decided to just train on the segment on discrimination. Discrimination hurts the business. So this was in hopes of changing the etiquette of how the beneficiaries were working together and just to educate them on what discrimination is, how to handle it, and the impact it has on oneself and on a business. So after the training, we saw quite a big change in our beneficiaries. They were more aware and alert of discrimination, the types of discrimination there is, and how it takes place and how to handle discrimination in the workplace and in a business. The beneficiaries started talking to each other with more respect and more sensitivity. And we found that with the training, it helped us not only with our deaf beneficiaries, but in South Africa, we're currently facing a problem of gender-based violence. So it gave us a good opportunity to educate on equality and fairness. So we found a good balance and change in this with our male beneficiaries now being more sensitive and treating our female beneficiaries as well with more equality rather than trying to be the male dominant in the program. So another change we also found after the training is that our deaf beneficiaries started engaging with the group more and asking questions and illustrating with the rest of the group. As before the training, they'd just self-isolate into their own groups and they wouldn't engage in any discussions whatsoever. So that was a good change for us. And another change we also found, which we saw a very good impact in the training for this, was the impact on our third phase of our program. They had to do a business pitch. So our 10 best business ideas would get funding to start a business or either grow their business further. And a lot of them now had included how to create a decent workplace in their businesses. So this was a really good change for us. We'd never seen this before with any of our programs. So it was good to see that there's a shift in a youth's mindset now that it's very important to create a decent workplace. If there's no decent workplace, business doesn't grow. You don't get return customers because you have disgruntled employees that either are going to discredit your business or discredit you as the employee of the business. So a happy employee, happy business. We also found that with our trainings, we'd like to slowly start introducing a little bit more of the segments from the Decent Workplace training on the safety and health policies that we need to put into youth business. This was mainly because of COVID. We found that a lot of them started skipping out on safety measures. They don't find the importance of things like cutting machines, that there needs to be an instruction on the wall on how to use certain machinery, and our fire escapes, the importance of having fire escapes in a business. So we'd like to start introducing this, and due to the results we saw from last year's program, we're given the opportunity to implement the same program this year. So we'll be implementing on a fuller scale with the Decent Workplace training.
Great, Linda, I can imagine there are going to be loads of questions for you because it's a great story about how you did the training. It obviously landed. There were some aha moments. So we will have breakout rooms where you can ask those questions, but you're not going to share a video of one of the participants in the program, I believe?
We'd like to share a video of Maria Morgan. She's a 21-year-old lady. She joined the program because she's very interested in fashion and she wants to start her own clothing line in the future. So we'll just play a clip from her on how the training impacted her.
Hi, how are you? My name is Maria. My surname is Morgan. I live in Ekurhuleni, which is a place based in South Africa. I joined the YID program because I love fashion. And also, I wanted to know how to make clothes. I started working at Ekurhuleni School for the Deaf from the 3rd of February, 2021. I was a class assistant there. I was responsible for assisting the teacher and also for supervising learners. During the program, we were trained on discrimination. In the training, the topic was discrimination hurts the business. We learned about different types of discrimination, the emotional impact on self, the negative impact it has on business operation, and the policies that they must have to protect workers. The most important thing that I learned about discrimination in the workplace is the negative impact it has on staff, and also the environment, how it can be destructive, and the effect it has on business. Since we did the training on discrimination, I've noticed that the people in the program were more accommodative, they were more insensitive, they were inclusive towards each other, especially to those who are deaf. During the discrimination training, I found a video which was playing and it challenged me. I think this training is important for everyone because it will help us to understand that there's a different types of discrimination. It is important to understand that discrimination is toxic.
Thank you so much, Linda, and a virtual thank you to Maria. In a very few words, and sign language, really express the impact that it has had, that it can have both negatively and positively. So that's a fantastic testimonial. So before we go into the breakout groups, and I'll tell you what those groups are in a second, back to Carol or maybe Gladys in the first instance about, is COVID a moment, or the impact of COVID a moment where we need to, rethink decent work, which I guess could mean either more emphasis on an area or less emphasis and so forth. So what are we hearing back? What are we seeing around the COVID impact on decent work? Gladys?
Thank you, Anita. And I think it's an interesting question. COVID-19 has actually exposed some of the loopholes that existed around decent work, as well as safety for employees, because you realize COVID itself is a biological hazard. The fact that people get it through infectious and it's brought about by the virus. So you realize that most businesses were not ready on how do they actually ensure that their workplaces are safe. Do they provide masks? Do they provide PPEs? Do people work from home or work in the office? I think COVID-19 in the realities of promoting or really enhancing decent work as well as safe spaces, it's really provided that wake-up call. From a business point of view, we've seen businesses having to shut down, or even continuity plans being developed to really deal with risks, emerging risks like COVID-19, because initially most of the risks that most businesses are anticipate for political risks related to fire. But you see, this is a medical crisis. This is a health crisis that is affecting each and everyone equally. So I would say that, COVID-19 has made decent work discussion a reality. What does decent work mean when it comes to, in a crisis environment when you're dealing with health issues such as COVID-19? So I think we saw most businesses not being ready. And even most government, and even there were non-existent policies on how to really ensure workers are taken care of, because, for instance, if a worker is working from home or if maybe they've closed down their store, is there really a legal framework that says you have to pay them? Are they considered on leave or not on leave? Are they still on employment? So there were a lot of contractual issues that emerged. And I'm glad that, for instance, in Kenya or even neighboring countries, they were quick enough to really come up with adaptive policies or adaptive frameworks that would inform employers on this. We also had people do half pay. Is that really legal? Was that really legal, or it was just an arrangement between an employee and an employer? We saw children being home, because schools were closed. And here we're talking about issues to do with child labor, which was prominent during the COVID-19 crisis, especially within the agriculture sector. So you see, we can say that COVID-19 really brought out some of these emerging issues that are related to decent work. And I would say that with policies and with legal frameworks really being enhanced or creating that enabling environment where businesses or even different stakeholders can make informed decisions, really have played a key role. And I hope right now, even as businesses have developed their business continuity plans, then they will still continue updating them, even as we wait for future crises, because this is not the end. And if at all and a business is looking to be sustainable, they need to think about emerging risks that come beyond COVID, or even risks that are not even foreseen. How does a business prepare? And I think COVID-19 has really been a wake-up call, and it's really exposed the challenges of decent work. We've seen even a lot of issues to do with discrimination, inclusion. We've seen a lot of diversity conversation as a result of COVID-19. So I would say most emerging issues related to employment and even health of workers has become more prominent. And I hope businesses are now ready for the next crisis, should it be another health crisis, political, or any other economic crisis that we are facing.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Gladys. Carol, is there anything you want to add?
I think I completely agree with what Gladys said. I think it's COVID-19 has helped us build the case for the importance of decent work, because when you talk about safe and healthy environment, so we were talking about ventilation, the importance of having the environment ready for situations like that, the equipment that you need to use, the masks and all of that. I think it also helped build a good case for why you should pay for Social Security as well, because in this situation, people were getting sick, employees were getting sick, the entrepreneur was getting sick. So how you can benefit from having that protection behind yourself. And one thing that we have observed at YBI, just building on that, is some of the entrepreneurs that have been through the decent work training, they have managed things differently during COVID, thanks to the knowledge that they have got by understanding decent work principles. So you could see from how they were managing the work environment and how they were trying to protect employees. And we even had cases where the entrepreneur managed somehow to pay the employees' salaries, even though they were not working. So I think that shows, the commitment that they have to their employees, and how they manage to understand all those principles and put them into practice in a moment that was, really challenging for all entrepreneurs. I think that just highlights the importance of decent work and help us build a case, because this was one pandemic. We can face many others in the future, and also other political, economic, and sanitary crisis as well. And you need to be prepared for that.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to go into breakout rooms, and I think we have a slide which says what they are, but I'll just say, and a maestro in the background is going to be managing all of that. I think you're able to choose which group you want to go into. Right, here they are. So about influencing the sector, to move from this being a nice to have to something everybody is doing. Now I can't read them. How can we build decent work training into our current service offer? Where are the entry points, or how might we change the mindset of young entrepreneurs to accept decent work? So I think that somebody is going to explain how you choose which group you go in. And having paid attention to some of the questions in the chat group, I mean, whatever the heading of the breakout group is, it's a space for discussion. So you can bring other perspectives and questions into those groups as well. So I think how are people supposed to choose their breakout rooms? Amelia, do you want to instruct us?
So there is an option on your bottom of your screen that should allow you to select which room you want to go. The 3 rooms are named, have different
Right, so you click
options,
on breakout
titles.
rooms?
Yes.
If you're struggling to
s-
find the option, you can also write in the chat and we can send you there manually. So if you're struggling to find the option and the breakout rooms, just type in the chat the number of the group you would like to join and we can send you there.
Okay.
Okay, so we've had one
Milton,
person
I'm
want to
sending
go
you to
one.
group. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, so you scroll all the way to the bottom of that breakout screen to join. And as you would expect, after the breakout groups, we'll come back into plenary and we'll just share what some of the key discussion points were coming out of the groups. Great. Okay, are you going to press the magic button now and we all end up in our breakout rooms?
People
I'm
are already
still
in the
the only
room.
one joining.
But the only one. Do you want to go? Do you want me and you?
I think I haven't joined one, so let me do that. Just toss me into a group.
Okay, I'll put you in the first one.
Hi, I think we're all back from our breakout rooms. Inevitably, as soon as that message goes up saying you've only got X number of seconds left, somebody's just on the cusp of making some sort of amazing, insight. But in the same way we've been saying that you've got to find a starting point for ESOs and for entrepreneurs, it's a starting point for our discussion as well. We're not going to finalize everything, but we wanted to both, inform, inspire, get a sense of commitment. And I wonder if I could just go around Gladys, Carol, and Linda, just to share, 2 of the key points that came out of your discussions. And maybe Linda, I'll start with you this time.
2 points that came out from ours was our topic, sorry. So we were discussing how do we change the mindset of youth entrepreneurs to accept decent work. One of our points was mentorship and business coaching. This is to guide youth and almost mold their mindset and having someone to show them the aspects of what's right and wrong in business and how do you grow your business, the policies that are needed to implement in the business to grow it, as well as what to look out for. This also opens a platform for them to also network through mentorship and business coaching, where they're able to introduce them to other people and other businesses to educate them a little bit about business operations, the correct way of operating a business and how to keep it healthy. So that's one of our points, as well as we discussed on educating on the benefits of a decent workplace. So with this is the emphasis of growth, business growth, that if we educate on the benefits, how will it grow their business in the future and in the present? So a satisfied employee or a happy employee are more likely to refer and bring business to the company as opposed to a disgruntled employee where they're more likely to discredit. And as well as we've seen that when your staff is happy, your employees are happy and you get return customers because there's good customer engagement with your employees. So we can look at Starbucks. Starbucks staff are always energetic. They're always smiling. So this creates a relationship where you're always coming back to the same Starbucks rather than venturing out to different ones. You stick to one place, and it also brings in more new customers. So we felt it's important to bring awareness and education and changing the mindset of the youth.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think when we had our plenary session before, you said happy staff, happy business. So that's another thing for us to remember. Carol, can I turn to you for some of the highlights of your discussion?
Yeah, sure. So in our group, we were discussing how we can build decent work training into a current service offer. So what we have discussed is the importance of finding the right balance between the content that you present to the entrepreneur, depending on the stage that they are at, and also when to introduce the content. So we were sort of discussing the importance of introducing the concepts of decent work from an early stage. So when people are starting up their business, so they already build awareness. But then when the business already exists, have employees, it's really important to go deeper in some of those things, and that's when you see the most immediate impact, because building awareness, you're going to see the impact later on. But it's really important to already introduce those concepts early on. We also discuss the importance of already having some of the business, the decent work principles as part of even the selection criteria. So one of the people in the group were sharing that they already have as part of their selection criteria that they don't work with people who have child labor as part of the business, but then they also assess what people are already doing in some decent work principles more as an assessment from early on to understand where the entrepreneur is at, and then work with them to improve those issues within the business. So we talked a lot about training here, but we also talked about using the decent work principles as part of mentoring and coaching programs as well. So preparing mentors, coaches, to be able to address those challenges in the sessions that they run. So it's another entry point that we have in our service offer, is to train them on the decent work principles, and then they can cover those topics as they come up in the mentoring and coaching sessions with the entrepreneurs. And then finally, we were having an interesting discussion about the thing about building the business case for decent work. I think we spoke a lot here about the importance of building the case for the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur understanding the importance of decent work. But then we started to discuss how it is important to also help the employee understand what they get out of the decent work principles, because sometimes you get resistance on their side. So we already talked about employees don't wanting to sign a contract with the employer, so they're not attached to them. We were talking about protective equipment and how some employees have a big resistance on using them because the boots are uncomfortable, and it's summer in Kampala, it's summer in Nairobi, and I don't want to use rubber gloves, for example. So probably an evolution of the training is also to think about how we can help the entrepreneur to show their employees what they can get out of those decent work principles. Thanks.
Great. And then Gladys, if I can hand over to you.
For us, we discussed how do you actually make this nice to have discussion around decent work, fair and safe jobs as a key priority for intermediaries and ESOs. And one of the proposals was, the issue around emphasizing importance of talent management. In our group, we had different enterprise support organizations who are supporting different SGBs at different stages. So one of the highlights was, them emphasizing what is the importance of talent, to SGBs, either as they're developing their strategy, as they're developing their plans, in their programs, these ESOs need to focus around talent management. Why should we think about employees, the talents we have in the workplace, even as we are developing our strategy? Of course, examples were given of what currently is ongoing. One of the ESOs talked about, like, when COVID came up, they had set a budget and a task force for dealing with COVID-19 risks. And of course, they emphasized on the importance of setting aside a certain budget in dealing with some of these issues, these emerging topics. And then, of course, there was also an emphasis on training, Is it possible for us to integrate some of these topics in their current module, in their current delivery within their program, because they see the importance of capacity building and engaging different SGBs at different stages, both the management, but also, the teams within those SGBs on this very important topic. So training was proposed, and then also trying to assess, and I think Carol has mentioned it, trying to determine where are these SGBs, or where are these enterprises that these ESOs support in their journey around decent work. Are they still at that there's something we normally call a continuum, you can look at it as a risk continuum. So it's like looking at where are they, looking at the different elements, be it the standards, be it the principles, where are they in their journey towards promoting decent work. So identifying that map, and then of course showcasing through peer learning or through awards, SGBs that are really doing something positive, in promoting this particular topic, with that they can actually advocate and ensure that other SGBs within their programs are really championing and taking this topic as a serious and a forefront topic.
Thank you so much it sounds like I could only join one breakout room, but it sounds like you had great discussions in all of the groups. And I think it's quite helpful for even those of us who were presenting to hear different perspectives and different points that we might want to develop. I think, our main call to action coming out of this is do it. If you're not doing it, do it. If you are doing it, keep doing it. But also that, even for those of us who are presenting here, we're always learning and we'll always adapt. So I think do it and share. Share our learning, share what is working, share what's not working. So I think then we can build up our collective knowledge, our collective practice in this area. And I think also, understanding where there's challenges we need to overcome, but also to celebrate, where is it working? Where have people really had aha moments? And where can we really demonstrate that this is, good for people, good for businesses, and so forth. And of course, practical tools. YBI and Gladys as B@C have developed practical tools. So please do reach out. If you're wanting to know what are those tools, how can they help you, how might you adapt them to your context. So I think that brings us to the end of our allotted time. I don't know whether Dennis is going to take over again, or if it sits with me to thank you all for participating, thank all the panelists, thank Maria for the video that we had the opportunity to watch earlier. And again, please stay engaged. And I think Dennis has turned his camera on, so I think I'll hand back to him then.
Thank you, Anita, and the team for the great discussion. I believe this has been a very informative and insightful session for every one of us, and I believe all of us have learned something new. But remember, this is just the beginning of the discussion. The panelists have shared their contact details on the chat, and also you can connect with them on Umbrella. So please remember that also this is not the last day of Sankal Forum. Tomorrow we have an in-person session, and also if you're in Nairobi, please feel free to pass by Kenya School of Monetary Studies. We'll have very exciting sessions there tomorrow. So this is just the beginning of the discussions, and I want to thank everyone for taking time to attend this session. So this marks the end of our session today. But remember, like I've said, I want to repeat again, feel free to connect with the panelists in case you have any questions, network with them, they've shared their contacts. And also, if you have time tomorrow, please feel free to come by at the Kenya School of Monetary Studies. So thank you very much, everyone. And I wish you a great afternoon, great evening, great morning, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you.